Welcome to Superhero Pow. I'm your host nerd, Tom Fremgen. I don't know about you, but I'm a fan of Thor. And I'm a big fan of writer Jason Aaron, who, by the way, has been killing it on the Thor comics since 2012. And early on, Jason hinted at his magnum opus to come, The War of the Realms. Unfortunately, turning Jane Foster into the Thunder God sidetracked the war. But then Jason turned her into a fan fave, and the storyline lasted longer than anyone could have guessed. Once Thor became the Thunder God again, Jason got back on track with the War of the Realms, and Marvel spun it off as a big crossover event. A textbook illustration of a bad crossover event. Seriously, I've been waiting like 6 years for this, and yikes. For those of you living in a cave, a crossover event is when characters cross over in a limited series, usually a lot of characters. And the storyline of said limited series crosses over into several regular series. If the readers buy all those issues, it means big bucks for the publishers. So the marketing department makes a big deal out of it, and boom, crossover event. Now, in order for a crossover event to be a success, at least in the eyes of the readers, because the publishers only care about the sales figures, it has to be good. But since one man's junk is another man's treasure, good is a very relative term. Still, there are 5 things a publisher can do to make readers embrace a crossover event. 1. Big name talent. If Marvel was doing crossover events in the 60s, they would be written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby. Not written by Larry Lieber and drawn by Carl Burgos. No offense. 2. A story concept worthy of being told as an event. Robin's first day of college is not going to cut it. 3. A complete story, with a beginning, middle, and end. You might think this would be obvious, but you would be wrong, as some crossover events have just covered a chapter of a bigger story. 4. A narrative viewpoint, because you need a character-specific viewpoint of a story so that readers will have emotional connection to the events. In some cases, you can have a plot-driven narrative, meaning the events take center stage and the characters are merely dealing with it. But this means the plot has to be active, and it can't just be a situation. 5. A worthwhile result of the story, besides the defeat of the villain. And Batman getting a new car, again, isn't going to cut it. Lastly, since the nature of a crossover event is crossovers, there must be an easy-to-follow roadmap for the readers. If the readers don't know to read Superman Beyond number 1 and 2, in between Final Crisis number 3 and 4, well then they're just going to become confused and start to hate said crossover. Okay, with all that said, let's go over how the War of the Realms whiffed on 4 of those all-important points. 1. Did it have big name talent? Yeah, pretty much. As I said, Jason Aaron has been killing it on Thor, even with Lady Thor. And artist Russell Dauterman is a respected artist, who's worked on Captain America movies and also worked with Jason on the so-called Lady Thor hit. 2. Was the story worthwhile? Yes, it was. The Dark Elf Malekith, you might remember him as the most underdeveloped MCU villain in the film Thor: The Dark World. Well, he's more interesting in the comics, and here, with his cross-realm allies, has declared war on all 10 realms, per Norse mythology. And every superhero in Midgard, our realm, must join in the fight. Only someone who hates Thor or mythology would be against this storyline. So, good job, Marvel. 3. Was it a complete story? Nope, because the actual War of the Realms started some 12 issues earlier in Thor's regular series. So the crossover event, the War of the Realms, actually started after 9 of the 10 realms have already been conquered by Malekith and his forces. The limited series and its dozens of crossover issues just deal with the end of the war, the attack on Earth. It reminds me of Brian Michael Bendis' Secret Invasion, which wasn't about the secret invasion at all, as the invasion was no longer a secret, and this was just a conclusion of it. In both cases, it's like watching Return of the Jedi without watching A New Hope or An Empire Strikes Back. All the readers have is an opening crawl to explain how the realms were conquered, how Malekith rose to power, how he forged alliances with characters who would typically kill him on sight. Not to mention, how was the famous Rainbow Bridge destroyed? Or how did Malekith create his own Black Bridge? And the how and the why there are Asgardian refugees living in New York City. Illegally, it seems. So, The War of the Realms is not a story, it's a chapter in a bigger book, and that does not make for a good crossover event. 4. Is there a narrative viewpoint? No, not really. You could say Thor, but he's only in 3 of the 6 issues. So it's Thor's mom, Freya. Well, that's a good guess, but she's sidelined in the final 2 issues, so neither her or Thor's viewpoint really carries us through the story. Well, maybe it's Malachi's story. Great choice, but again, no. It could have been. This whole thing was his holy war. But he does nothing but twist his theoretical evil mustache for the whole story, giving us no insight on his reasons or goal. So what about the plot? Still a no, because the plot doesn't move. It just is. Once the Earth is attacked and conquered, the first 2 issues, the plot just sits there. There's no driving action as the heroes try to survive losing, and the villains don't really do anything at all. Okay, Malachi turns venom into a sword, but at best you can say this is an event story, like Jurassic Park. Park breaks, people try to survive. But that's when you need personal narratives to engage the viewers, or in our case, readers. And The War of the Realms is totally missing that. Aside from Freya and Thor tag teaming, characters drift in and out of the story. Doctor Strange has a big moment in issue number 2, and is never seen again. Power Man and Iron Fist are on the front lines in issue number 3, never seen again. She-Hulk, Captain Kal-El, Marvel, and the Punisher are here for most of the book, but do little more than punch things. Daredevil has some impact, as the new guardian of what's left of the Rainbow Bridge, which I suppose makes sense to someone, but he's mostly played as just a device. Lastly, Jane Foster, one of the few characters who actually has a story arc. She used to be the Thunder God, and now she's nothing. Although that didn't stop Freya from declaring her the new All-Mother for some reason. Jane wants to fight, but mostly can't until the final issue. Unfortunately, her story arc is nearly drowned out by the chaos of all the other characters running around in the story. So this is not how to do a good story, let alone a crossover event. Now, before I get to 5, the conclusion, let's talk the crossover issues. Was there a roadmap to the crossover aspect of the story? Nope. Which really sucks considering there were some 30 crossover issues. And therefore, the main title is full of narrative holes, as in missing info. Like Malachi's allies. I have no idea what happened to 5 of them. That's more than half. They're just gone. The main one, Laufey, the king of the Frost Giants, who conquered New York City, he gets a final battle. But the Fantastic Four are MIA, which is weird because they were the ones shown fighting him earlier. And what about the X-Men? If this is such a huge world-ending event, where are they? Okay, they did have a 3-issue crossover series, but did it have anything to do with the story? Because they aren't even mentioned in all 6 issues of the main title. And what about the Avengers who went to rescue Thor from Frost Giant Land? A fair portion of the main title shows us this, but when they find Thor, he's battle crazy and it looks like he's about to smite them. Next issue, everyone's fine and back at the Avenger Mountain. To which I say, what the hell happened? But Marvel doesn't care, because they made no effort to let me know where I might be able to read that part of the story. And if they don't care, why should I? This is a bad crossover event. Okay, now 5. Was this a worthwhile ending? Big no there, as the main result of the story is Thor gets his original hammer, Mjolnir, back. I'll try not to go into the convoluted tale of how he got it and why it's not even the original hammer. I'll just say the story wasn't about Thor getting his hammer back. So who cares? This is not a good use of a crossover event. And on top of that, he loses his eye and his arm is still missing. So who the hell cares about a hammer? Who thought this was a worthwhile conclusion after buying somewhere between 6 and 30 comic books at $4 plus a pop? Tying back to my last point, Thor's plan to defeat Malachi, recreating the World Tree, kinda, and bringing in past and future Thors, has no setup. Where did Thor get these ideas? Was it set up in another crossover issue that Marvel didn't feel the need to tell us readers about? Hell, it wasn't even clear that the World Tree was dying or dead, so why does somewhat creating a new one fix anything? This is one bad crossover event. Well, assuming you're not bored yet, I'll go over a few other ending results, like Odin making Thor the new Allfather. That's just stupid, especially with Odin still alive. We all know Thor is going to suck at the job, and it's not going to last very long, so whatever. Jane Foster is becoming Valkyrie. Okay, that's reasonable. She was a hit as Lady Thor, so that's kinda cool. But that leads us to another lame part of the story, the deaths. We all know big events have to kill characters. Not sure why, they just do, it seems. They started with killing Odin. Just kidding, he's fine. Then they killed Loki. Who buys that one, right? Yeah, he's fine. Then they killed the original Valkyrie, the blonde one. Well, I guess they killed all the Valkyrie, but Broomhilda is the only one anyone cares about. But considering she shows up for a measly 10 panels before promptly being beheaded, it's clear she wasn't killed for story impact. She was killed to give Jane Foster another superhero persona to borrow. So, whatever. Jane Foster fans are happy, Valkyrie fans are upset, and everyone else doesn't care. Way to build up readership, Marvel. Just doing almost everything you can to make another forgettable, pointless, confusing crossover event. Or in other words, a bad crossover event. Lastly, let's nitpick the talented creative team. First, Jason Aaron. All the jokes sucked. You're really bad at it, but I'm glad you seemed to know this as you stopped midway through the story. Russell Dauterman, a lot of your layouts suck. You're often too far away from the action. I can't tell who these people are or what's going on. And colorist Matthew Wilson, now this may be a printing issue, but when everything is colored with the same hue and saturation, we can't tell what any of it is. All right, I'm done. And I'll say after years of reviewing bad comics for AintItCool.com, I've tried to stay on the more positive side these days. But I had such high hopes for the War of the Realms, and it's just so textbook bad. I had to talk about it. At least I hope you enjoyed my breakdown, and thanks so much for watching. If you actually want to see me do this again, please subscribe and let me know. Or subscribe and tell me how wrong I was. Or just subscribe. I think what I'm trying to say is, subscribe.